The Shadow of the Wall: How Trump's Policies Could Fuel the U.S. Opioid Crisis. The United States is grappling with an opioid crisis of unprecedented proportions. While 2023 marked a significant turning point, with overdose deaths finally declining after decades of relentless increase, the fragile progress achieved hangs precariously in the balance. Former government officials are issuing stark warnings. Donald Trump's controversial policies, particularly his coercive tariffs and drastic federal funding cuts, could unravel this hard-won progress and unleash a devastating resurgence of the epidemic. The irony is palpable. While the Trump administration vehemently pledged to stem the flow of illicit drugs, particularly the deadly synthetic opioid fentanyl, into the U.S., its actions, experts argue, are inadvertently paving the path for a catastrophic influx. This week's imposition of tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China, ostensibly designed to curb drug trafficking, is a prime example of this counterproductive approach. Jim Crotty, former Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA Deputy Chief of Staff, characterizes the tariffs as coercive and warns of their potential to backfire spectacularly. The core of the problem lies in the administration's misguided approach. Instead of fostering international collaboration and strategic partnerships, the Trump administration's aggressive trade policies, coupled with significant federal funding cuts, are creating a perfect storm for escalating drug trafficking. Enrique Roig, a former Department of State official with extensive experience in the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, INL and USAID, points to the chilling effect of these cuts on crucial anti-drug initiatives. Federal funding cuts have crippled the effectiveness of vital programs, leaving the U.S. significantly more vulnerable. One crucial casualty is the UN Container Control Program, CCP, a cornerstone of international drug interdiction efforts. Historically funded by the State Department, the CCP has played an instrumental role in identifying and seizing hundreds of tons of illicit drugs annually, disrupting the flow of narcotics before they reach U.S. shores. Roig reveals that the program's implementation in Mexico, a critical area of concern for the Trump administration, has been brought to a standstill due to the funding cuts. This is particularly concerning considering Mexico is a primary target, given the designation of its cartels as transnational criminal organizations. The lack of funding extends beyond international partnerships. Domestically, the cuts have hampered the development and deployment of cutting-edge drug detection technology, leaving U.S. law enforcement agencies playing catch-up in the relentless arms race against ever-evolving drug trafficking networks. The global drug supply is increasingly dominated by highly potent synthetics, such as fentanyl and the emerging nitazenes, often shipped as inconspicuous powders or precursor chemicals, easily evading detection with outdated technology. Furthermore, the administration's cost-cutting measures have led to counterproductive decisions. The recent suspension of military plane usage for deporting immigrants, including those involved in drug-related crimes, citing exorbitant costs, highlights a baffling prioritization of short-term savings over long-term security. This decision not only undermines law enforcement efforts, but also fosters an environment where drug trafficking can flourish. The Trump administration's aggressive stance towards China further exacerbates the situation. Roig emphasizes the importance of collaboration with Mexico and cautions against alienating key partners. He warns that Trump's confrontational approach towards China could severely jeopardize the Biden administration's efforts to negotiate vital counter-narcotics cooperation agreements. The consequences extend beyond border security. Roig highlights the critical role of community-based violence prevention programs, often funded by USAID, in deterring young people from joining international criminal organizations and cartels. The Trump administration's purging of numerous websites detailing these programs underscores a concerning disregard for proactive, community-focused strategies. This neglect could potentially fuel a surge in recruitment and escalate drug-related violence. The potential ramifications of these policy decisions are deeply troubling. A resurgence of the opioid crisis, with a consequent increase in overdose deaths, is a real and imminent threat. Crotty raises another critical concern: the lack of reliable data. Layoffs at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, could severely limit the capacity to track overdose deaths, effectively blinding the nation to the true extent of the crisis. Furthermore, the administration's attacks on government data sharing could exacerbate the information deficit, leaving policymakers operating in the dark. The combined effect of these seemingly disparate policies, coercive tariffs, devastating funding cuts, alienation of international partners, and the undermining of data collection, paints a grim picture. The fragile gains achieved in reducing overdose deaths could evaporate, plunging the U.S. back into the depths of the opioid crisis. The future looks precarious, and the silence from INL and UNODC on this escalating threat only amplifies the urgency of addressing these critical issues before it is too late. The wall may be intended to keep drugs out, but the current policies are inadvertently building a wall around the nation's ability to effectively combat the opioid crisis.